She said it into the silence between songs, in a voice pitched for one table and heard by 40, someone in this room is wearing a wire. And Kenji Sato, who had not been surprised by anything in 6 years, set down his glass and smiled slowly, the way a man smiles when something he had stopped believing in walks back into the room, wearing an apron. Rewind 11 minutes, because the sentence is the easy part. The 11 minutes before it are where the danger lived. Imani Brooks had felt it the moment she carried the first tray onto the floor, that wrongness she had spent 2 years trying to unlearn how to feel. The Meridian Club was not a club. It was a vault with a wine list. A windowless gold box buried 2 floors under the city, where the most careful men in Chicago came precisely because the room was supposed to be deaf. No phones, no signals, no ears. The walls were lined with something that drank radio the way the marble drank light. And the men who met here, because the Meridian was the one place on earth they could speak and be certain the words died in the air between them. Except Imani's skin was telling her the room was listening. She could not have explained it to anyone who had not done what she used to do. It was not a sound. It was an absence with a shape, the specific dead quality the air takes on near a live transmitter. The faint wrongness that her body had been trained to read for 9 years before the world decided she was no longer allowed to read it. She moved through the floor, refilling water nobody had touched, and she let her trained attention do the thing she had promised herself it would never do again. She swept. By the time she reached the far end of the room, she had it narrowed to a quadrant, and by the time she cleared the second pour, she had it narrowed to a table. And by the time she understood which man at that table was sitting the way a wired man sits, 2 square. One arm held a half-inch from his ribs to protect the pack taped beneath it, sweating in a cold room. She also understood the thing that turned her stomach to water. The wired man was not a cop. Cops did not get into the Meridian. The wired man was one of Kenji Sato's own, which meant the recording was not going to a courthouse. It was going to whoever was about to use it to put Kenji Sato in the ground, and it was going there live, right now, through walls that were never supposed to leak. Which meant the man had found a way to beat the room, and a man who can beat the Meridian is a man with help on the outside and a deadline on the inside. Imani Brooks had a choice. She could carry her tray to the service door, walk up 2 flights, step into the rain, and let these dangerous men sort out their own dangerous deaths the way she had spent 2 years letting the world sort itself out without her. No one would ever know she'd known. Or she could open her mouth and become visible in the most dangerous room in the city. She set down the tray. She found the stillest, most dangerous man at the most dangerous table, and she looked Kenji Sato in the eyes. "Someone in this room is wearing a wire," she said. The Meridian Club belonged to Kenji Sato the way a held breath belongs to a man underwater. Completely, and against the clock. People said the usual things about him. That he had buried his predecessor without a war and without a body. That he counted in 2 languages and trusted in neither. That he was beautiful the way the edge of something sharp is beautiful. You admired it from a measured distance and you did not test it. That he had not slept a full night in 6 years, and that the men who worked the dawn shift had stopped finding it strange to see his light on. What they did not say, because the only people who knew it had died in the same room 6 years ago, was the true shape of the wound. There had been a meeting once in a place Kenji had been promised was secure. He had spoken freely because the room was deaf. The room was not deaf. Someone had gotten a recording out of walls that were supposed to hold, and 3 days later, the men who had been in that room with him, his second, his oldest friend, The two soldiers who had carried him out of his father's funeral were ambushed on a route only the recording could have revealed. Kenji lived. They did not. He had spent 6 years, and a fortune since then, chasing the one thing money turned out to be unable to buy: the certainty that a room was actually as silent as it claimed to be. He built the Meridian to be unbeatable. He had told himself it was unbeatable. And in the small hours when he was not sleeping, he knew that he had told himself the same thing about the last room, too. So when a waitress he had never seen before set down her tray and announced, in the calm, flat voice of someone reading a fact and not a fear, that his unbeatable room had been beaten, Kenji Sato did not feel alarm. He felt the floor of 6 years drop away beneath a single sentence. He smiled slowly. Not because it was funny, because for 6 years he had been the only person in any room who believed a room could be turned against him. And he had just met the second. "Say that again," Kenji said. The room had gone the particular silent that rooms go when 40 dangerous men stop pretending to enjoy themselves. "This time, tell me how you know." Amani's heart was kicking against her ribs hard enough to crack bone. 2 years of carefully built smallness was coming off her like a coat in a fire. Every exit in the room had lit up in her mind the second she opened her mouth, and she could feel the man at the far table, the wired one, going very still. The stillness of someone who has just heard the floor give way. She did not look at him. Looking at him would tell him she'd found him. "Because the room is wrong," she said. "You spent a great deal of money making this place deaf, and right now it isn't, and there's only one reason a deaf room starts hearing again." She held Kenji's eyes, only his. "Because someone in it is carrying the ears. And he's transmitting live, which means he has help upstairs, and a clock running, which means you have less time than you think to decide whether you believe a waitress." For 1 full second, Kenji Sato did not move. Then he set down his glass. "I believe the waitress," he said. "Welcome in, my fearless hearts and beautiful night owls. Before this room gets dangerous and the clock is already running, do me one small thing. Tap subscribe, leave a like, and tell me which city you're listening from tonight. I love watching our little After Dark family stretch across the map, town by town all over the world. Every comment, every bit of love you leave here is what lets us keep pulling these dangerous nights apart one careful thread at a time, together. So, find your quiet place. Lock the door. Dim the lights and lean in close. Because there's a man in this room who just realized the only person who can save him is the one he never noticed." "Don't point," Imani said, before Kenji could turn his head. "If you look at him, he runs, and if he runs, he transmits the room number, and we lose the only minute we have. Right now he thinks I felt something, and panicked. Let him keep thinking it." Kenji Sato had spent 6 years giving orders. He was not, by any measure of his life, a man who took them. And yet the part of him that had been screaming into the silence for 6 years, "The room is not safe. The room is never safe," recognized in this woman's flat, certain voice the sound of someone who finally spoke its language. "What do you need?" he said. Not a command. A question. He could not remember the last time he had asked one. 2 minutes, and your worst poker face. Imani picked her tray back up, because a waitress with a tray is invisible, and a waitress without one is a threat. "I'm going to walk the floor like nothing happened. When I set this tray down at the bar, the man I set it down nearest is the one. Have your people ready, but keep them loose. The second he knows we know, the recording stops being evidence and starts being a detonator." "You've done this before," Kenji said quietly. Imani's hands did not pause. But something crossed her face. There and gone, a fish under ice. In another life, she said. It didn't end well. She walked the floor. She walked it the way she had walked 100 rooms in the life before this one, unhurried, smiling the empty smile, refilling glasses that did not need it, while every sense she owned narrowed to a single point of dead air at the far table. She passed the wired man close enough to smell the cold sweat on him. She felt the wrongness peak. And then she walked 3 more steps, set her tray down at the bar exactly beside him, and said, to no one, in the bored voice of a woman ending a shift, last calls at the small table. The gentleman in the gray. And Kenji Sato, watching, understood. The gentleman in the gray. Here is what Imani Brooks had buried under 2 years of trays and pressed aprons, and being the temperature of the wallpaper. She had been a technical surveillance countermeasures specialist, a sweeper in the trade. The person who walked into a room before the important people did and certified, with her own name on the line, that no one was listening. She planted them too, early in her career, which was how she got so good at finding them. You cannot truly sweep a room until you have learned to think like the person hiding the wire. She had a gift that bordered on the eerie. She could feel a live transmitter the way some people feel a storm in their knee. 9 years. Hundreds of rooms. Not one mistake. Until the one. She had swept a room. She had signed off on it. She had been tired. That was the detail she could never forgive. The human, ordinary smallness of it. And she had missed a device built into something she should have checked. And didn't. And the people who spoke in that room spoke freely. Because Imani Brooks had told them it was safe. It was not safe. What got recorded got someone killed. And when the after-action came, the agency needed a name that was not the name of anyone important. And Imani's name was on the sign-off sheet. They did not say she was incompetent. They said worse things, more quietly, with better grammar, and they let her resign with a reference that ensured she would never do the only thing she was built to do ever again. She had learned the lesson, just not the one they meant. She learned that her certainty had weight, that it could keep people alive or get them killed, and that the world would crucify her for the one time she was wrong, while never once thanking her for the hundreds of times she was right. So she set it down. She went small. She became a woman whose attention could not hurt anyone, because a waitress refilling water is not asked to certify that the room is safe. The ache of it was never that she missed the work. It was that she could still feel every wired room she walked into. Could not turn it off. Had tried for 2 years, and she had trained herself to swallow it, to carry the wrongness out the service door and say nothing, because the last time she'd spoken up about a room, her name had ended up on a different kind of sheet. And now the most dangerous man in the city was looking at her like the wrongness she felt was the most valuable thing in the building. It was the most dangerous offer she had ever almost been made. She could feel, already, how badly she wanted to say yes to it. The gentleman in the gray was named Day, and Day did the thing that caught men always do. When the soft net closed, he reached for the hard option. His hand went to his ribs, not for the wire, for the thing taped next to it. Imani saw it a half second before anyone else, because she was the only one in the room who had been watching his ribs the whole time. Down, she said, not shouted, said, the flat hard word of someone who had given it before, and her hand closed on Kenji Sato's lapel and pulled, and the two of them went sideways off the line Day was already clearing, and the thing that was meant to turn the meridian into a tomb went into the gold-leafed wall instead of into the table full of men. It was loud and it was fast, and it was over in the time it takes a trained room to fall on one man, and when the dust of it settled, Day was face down and disarmed, and the live transmitter was being crushed under Kenji Sato's heel, and Imani Brooks was on the floor with her back against a leather booth and a dangerous man's body still half shielding hers. Because in the chaos he had, without deciding to, turned himself into the wall between her and the room. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You pulled me out of the line," Kenji said. His voice was very low. "You felt the wrongness, you found the man, and then you put your own hand on me to move me out of the line." "I read the room," Imani said, breathing hard. "It's all I know how to do. No one has read a room and told me the truth in 6 years." He looked at her like she was the first solid thing he'd found in a long fall. "Everyone I pay swears the room is safe. You're the first person who ever told me it wasn't, and you don't even work for me." "I work for the catering company," Imani said. "Not anymore," said Kenji Sato. He took her up out of the vault and into the rain on the roof. "Because," he said, and she believed him. It was the only place he was sure no one was listening, and that small confession told her everything about the size of his wound. "You can't hire what I do," Imani said. The same argument she had made to no one for 2 years, finally said out loud to the one person who might not accept it. "It isn't a service. It tells you things you don't want to know. It tells you a room is dirty when you've already promised your people it's clean. It doesn't shut off, I would know. I've been trying to shut it off for 2 years, and all it did was teach me to stay quiet. I don't want it shut off," Kenji Sato said. And there it was. The thing the world had never said to her. Everyone, the agency, the people above her, the whole machinery of her old life, had spent her career asking her to be less certain, less loud, more agreeable, more quiet, more wrong in the convenient direction. And this man, ruined and beautiful and unsleeping, had just told her he wanted the exact thing about her that everyone else had treated as a liability to be managed. 6 years ago, someone got a recording out of a room I trusted," Kenji said, and the rain took some of the weight off the words. 4 men died on a route only that recording could have given up. I lived. I have spent 6 years and more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes trying to buy back the one thing I lost in that room. The ability to sit down with the people I'm responsible for and be certain the walls are deaf." His jaw moved. "I built the Meridian to be unbeatable, and tonight a waitress beat it before I poured my first glass. Which means I have been living in the same lie for 6 years, and only one person on earth could see it. And now you want to keep her where she can see your rooms," Imani said. Reading him, "I want," Kenji Sato said, "to never sit in a room again that you have not told me is safe. Everyone I employ stands between me and a bullet. You're the only one who can stand between me and the thing that actually killed my people." A pause, the rain, and then the line, low and certain, "Day is finished. The catering company can find another tray. I'm offering you the one job no amount of my money has ever been able to fill. Tell me you understand what I'm actually asking you to keep me safe from." "The walls," Imani said. "You're asking me to keep you safe from the walls." "From the walls," he agreed. She took it. Of course she took it. The wonder was how much it felt like setting something down rather than picking something up. 2 years of swallowed wrongness, finally allowed to mean something. The weeks that followed were the strangest of her life. Kenji Sato walked her into rooms before he walked into them himself, and she did the thing she was built for, and for the first time her certainty did not get buried under someone's convenience. He acted on it. Every time. She flagged a conference suite, and he canceled a sit-down that would have been recorded. The men who'd have been in it were alive, because she'd felt a storm in her knee. She cleared a room he'd been afraid of for years, and watched him sit down in it and, for the length of one meeting, breathe like a man who was not counting the exits. And she watched the wound underneath the wound start to close. Kenji Sato, who had not slept a full night in 6 years, began to sleep. Not much, not all at once, but the dawn shift men stopped finding his light on every morning. Because a man cannot rest until he believes the room is safe, and for the first time in 6 years there was a person in his life whose entire being was a guarantee that it was. He began to stand closer to her. By inches, the specific, terrifying intimacy of a man who trusts no walls, learning to trust a person, letting the one human being who could read a room read him, and finding that she never used what she read against him. Not once. "You keep doing that," she told him one night, on the roof, in the rain that had become their only safe room. Doing what? Sleeping. She studied him the way she studied every room, except her attention was not afraid anymore. "You think I haven't noticed? A man who hasn't slept in 6 years starts sleeping, and he thinks no one can tell. I can tell. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever watched a person do, and you don't even know you're doing it." Kenji Sato was quiet for a while. "I know," he said. Day had a partner upstairs, the help on the outside, the one Imani had named in her very first sentence without knowing his face. He surfaced in the 6th week, and he surfaced the way cornered men do, not at Kenji, who was guarded now beyond reaching, but at the one person who had made the unbeatable room beatable in reverse. The sweeper, the woman who could feel him coming, which was exactly why he could not get near her. Imani felt the wrongness in the parking structure a full 30 seconds before he moved. The dead air, the storm in her knee, and she had time for 3 words into the small device Kenji had insisted she carry. Wire, level 3. Now, and here is the thing that finally closed the wound she had carried for 2 years. This time, when she called it, the people she called it to moved. No one paused to ask whether the sweeper might be tired, might be wrong, might be a name convenient to blame. Kenji Sato had spent 6 weeks learning that her reed was the truest instrument in his world, and so his men were on level 3 before the man in the shadows finished raising his hand, and the recording he'd come to make, and the worst thing he'd come to do with it, never happened. And he learned the specific regret of underestimating a woman who could hear a room breathe. When it was over, Kenji came down to level 3 himself, which the protocols forbade, and he found her standing against a concrete pillar, with her hands shaking and her eyes already sweeping the space out of habit she would never lose. He crossed to her and he did the thing he had not done to another person in 6 years. He lifted his hand and put it against the side of her face, because he chose to. He did not flinch. "You were right," he said. "Before he even moved, you were right." "I'm always right about rooms," Imani said, and her voice cracked. "That's the whole problem. I've always been right about rooms. The one time I was wrong, people died, and the world decided that was the only time that counted." "I counted all the other times," Kenji Sato said. "I will count them for the rest of my life." And then, because he had become a man who told her the truth before she had to find it, "Everyone swears to protect me. You're the only one who ever told me the truth about a room. I'm asking you to stay, and the only thing I'm promising back is that I will never again make you carry what you feel out the service door in silence." She could have left after. That was always the part that mattered. The leak was sealed. Day and the man upstairs were both gone. Kenji Sato's rooms were, for the first time in 6 years, exactly as deaf as he had paid for them to be. There was nothing keeping Imani Brooks in the gold vault and the rain-wet roof above the city. The thing she'd been hired to fix was fixed. The door was open, and for once, it didn't lead somewhere smaller. She stood on the roof with the city below her and the dangerous, sleepless man behind her, sleeping now. And she understood he was letting her choose. That a man betrayed by a room he trusted would never ask anyone to swear they'd stay. The not asking was the gift. So she turned around before he could not ask her. "You don't need a sweeper anymore," she said. "The leak's sealed. The job's done." "I know," Kenji Sato said. "So I should go." "I know that too." He didn't move toward her. He let the measured distance hold. And then he gave her the truest thing he had. "I'm not asking you to stay because I need someone to read my rooms. You taught me how. I can feel the wrongness now. You've been teaching me for 6 weeks without saying so. You gave me back the certainty I lost in that room 6 years ago. A breath. I'm asking you to stay because you are the only room I have ever been certain was safe. And I would like to spend the rest of my life being the one place you never have to carry the wrongness out the door alone." Imani Brooks, who could feel any room being listened to that sentence with the whole of her terrible gift, checking it for the dead air of a lie. There was none. It was clean. The cleanest thing anyone had ever said to her. "You smiled," she said, stepping into the distance no one was allowed inside, and staying there. "When I said it. Someone in this room is wearing a wire, and 40 men went pale, and you smiled. I'd been the only one in every room who believed it could happen," Kenji said. "For 6 years, and then a waitress set down her tray and said the thing I'd been screaming into the silence. And for the first time I wasn't the only one." The corner of his mouth again. "You think I smiled because I was calm. I smiled because I was finally not alone in the room." Imani laughed, the first real one, the one she'd kept buried under 2 years of being the temperature of the wallpaper, and she put her hand over his where it rested against her face. "I told you someone was wearing a wire," she said. "You did. I never told you the rest of it." She held his eyes. "The reason I could feel it. The reason I can't ever turn it off. A beat. It's because some part of me has spent 2 years walking into rooms, hoping just one of them would finally be safe. I think I just found it, and it isn't a room at all."